Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat.
Resolves.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello friends, DJ here. This is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and today I want to talk to you about mill in our format. Mill has been problematic. We really haven't had the right general for it until now. Bruvac the Grandiloquent from Jumpstart. Bruvac is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary creature human advisor. If an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. Oh, Bruvac is so fun. It just takes every mill card and makes it better. And we need mill to be better in our format. Don't get me wrong, there are legendary creatures that people have made mill decks out of. I even had a mill deck for a really long time. The problem with these mill commanders is that they didn't really match with the mill strategy. In fact, many of them turned to combo to win their games. Ambassador Laquatus and Una Queen of the Fae, they actually win through infinite mana combos. You just get all the mana and you mill them out. Heck, Una isn't even milling, she's exiling things. And then Phoenix God of Deception, I was really excited about this commander, but then it ended up being just a bunch of relevant creatures, and I ended up winning when I finally cast Eater of the Dead and comboed them out. Sometimes I would even just beat down with my creatures because good blue-black creatures with higher than average toughness did the job. And look, it's not these legendary creatures' fault. It's the fault of mill and just how it measures up in other formats versus our formats. See, Magic cards are designed for every format, and mill is particularly powerful if abused in limited. Let's do a comparison. Okay, limited has 40 cards. You start off drawing 7, so you're down to 33 cards in your library. You know, you draw a card each turn, maybe you draw a couple more. Let's say that you draw 8 cards over the course of the game. That means that you only have to mill 25 cards to win a game of limited. So every single card that enters into the limited card pool is pretty powerful if it mills, 13 or 10 or something like that. Now let's compare that to Commander. Commander is 100 cards. You still only draw a hand of 7 down to 93. Let's say you draw, I don't know, many more cards in a turn and it goes 7 or 8 turns. We're talking about an 80 card library that you're having to go through. And then you start realizing that this is a multiplayer format, and that's 240 cards you have to get through. That is just so much more, and it's way more than doubling. So Bruvac doesn't make up for the shortcomings of these card designs. And we can really see this in some of the cards that have dominated limited and really are mediocre in this kind of deck. Jace Memory Adept was gross in limited. You landed Jace and you milled them 10, and then if they just didn't immediately attack and kill Jace, you would just mill them for 10 again, and it felt like it was impossible to win with a landed Jace. I felt that a little bit with Ashiok from War of the Spark. It's a more recent card, but you kind of realize like, oh, they played an Ashiok and then they recurred it from the graveyard and I've milled out now. That's how powerful these mill effects can be in limited. I mean, Merfolk's Secret Keeper was really powerful for a little bit. And so when you have a card that's balanced for limited, it doesn't translate well into Commander when it comes to mill. If only there was a set that was designed for just Commander, some sort of product that couldn't influence limited or even standard. We really do need a mill Commander and special mill cards just for us. I'm hoping that Bruvac is just one step along the way of more support for these cards. But Bruvac does enough, and so I want to talk about this mill deck. And the first thing I want to talk about, well, are some traps, specifically Archive Trap. Now, I call these traps because I'm not excited about one-off mill effects. No matter how many cards you mill from your opponent, it doesn't actually do anything for you until you mill that last card. I mean, you play a creature and it can prevent things from attacking you, like you can attack someone else, and even if you're not doing the majority of damage, maybe other people will attack that opponent. Like, creatures affect the board. You know, spells do things. Milling sometimes only helps your opponent. So one-off effects like Archive Trap, even if you get Startled Awake back, it's not enough. Even if you have your commander out on the board, it's not enough. Same thing with Increasing Confusion. You cannot pay enough mana into this to have it be good unless you go infinite and then, you know, play one of those other commanders. Now, I like Keening Stone. Keening Stone is really fun. Basically, you mill based on how much you've already milled. With Bruvac, this could be really strong. The problem is it's 11 mana to get going. 11 mana. It's so much. So play it if you want to, but if you don't, just don't feel bad for excluding this. Don't think it's great. And one other thing that we're not doing today is Persistent Petitioners. You don't need me to tell you, play 30 of them and a couple other spells and you're good to go. You know, we're trying to build a real mill deck, not a Petitioners deck. So we're going to go on to some of the top milling cards that I feel we need in this deck. And those are mill-based enchantments. See, the reason why is these hit the board, and if they stay on the board, they can see long-lasting mill that's recursive over and over again. And they kind of mill incidentally while we're doing other things that this deck wants to do. Psychic Corrosion is the top tier mill card in this deck. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent mills 2. That's awesome. Okay, I love that it's each opponent. We won't see that on a lot of other cards here. Teferi's Tutelage is new, 2 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, you get to loot, draw a card, and discard a card. I like that. Already doing something on the enchantment is great. And then whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2. Okay, it stinks that you have to target the opponent, but that's something that we're going to have to deal with. Sphinx's Tutelage and Jace's Erasure. Sphinx's Tutelage is 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and whenever you draw a card, target opponent mills 2. If they share a color, you get to do that again. That's pretty good because you could theoretically hit a bunch of cards in a row and mill far more than 2, making up for the fact that this does say target opponent. Ugh. Jace's Erasure, man, this one isn't even good either. Whenever you draw a card, you may have target player put 1 card. So if you want to cut one of these enchantments for something better, cut Jace's Erasure. Okay, we have a few more. Here's Fraying Sanity, 2 and a blue. This is actually an Aura Curse, so it enchants a player, and this one's really fun because it basically doubles up your mill against them. At the beginning of each end step, enchanted player mills X, where X is the number of cards they've milled this turn. So when you have Bruvac and you have Fraying Sanity, you like double, ends up working out really well. Patient Rebuilding is 3 blue. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent mills 3. Again, stinks that it's target, but with this one, you're going to get something out of it because for every land card they put in their graveyard that way, you draw a card. And if you're doubling up the mill of Patient Rebuilding, then you could draw more cards. Pretty cool. Finally, we have some other mills in Memory Erosion. 1 blue. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player puts mills 2. And Drown Secrets. Whenever you cast a blue spell, target player mills 2. I think these are great because Memory Erosion will affect each opponent. I know it's only for that player that's milling, but everyone is going to be casting spells, and some people are going to cast a lot of spells. So they're going to mill a lot of cards. Drown Secrets is really great because we want this deck to have a lot of card draw, have some interactions, have these cheap enchantments, so we will be playing a lot of blue cards. Next, we have just a touch of combo. I want to mention a few combos because mill is a strategy that's hard to win. And so sometimes you do want a combo out. I just had a problem with me never winning via mill in some of these other mill decks before. I'm hoping that Bruvac will change that. Painter's Servant. This card is so powerful, it used to be banned. It's just broken. And actually, no, it just messes with color. There's actually a lot of cards in Magic history that mess with color, but Painter's Servant can be particularly nasty with a few key combo pieces. This is 2 generic mana, and you basically just get to say, every card is blue. You're going to pick blue because you have Drown Secrets in your deck. Okay, so when you name everything as blue, that doesn't do anything until you have a card like Grindstone or Sphinx's Tutelage. Both of these things will have your opponent milling 2, and if they match colors, which they will 100% with Painter's Servant, they mill 2 more. Another fun combo, this is a fun combo, is Bruvac doubles everything. So if you happen to attack with Fleet Swallower or cast a Traumatize to take out half of your opponent's library, then Bruvac will take out the other half. Just a 1 card whoop, your library is gone. And then finally we have Altar of the Brood. This could be a really solid inclusion in this deck anyways. It's a 1 mana artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield in your control, each opponent puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Okay, so lands, fetch lands. I mean, you don't need fetch lands in this deck, but anything that enters the battlefield, any of these enchantments will just have everyone milling. So this could be a card you want in this deck anyways. Now, if you have a way to blink things in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out, then you get to mill everyone out. Deadeye Navigator and Cloud of Fairies is one such combination. Cloud of Fairies untaps the mana that you need to activate Deadeye Navigator, but we're not here for the combos. We're here to do some big milling. I think the first way to get some truly epic milling going on is to embrace Bruvac. In fact, I'd like a few more of him. Let's Spark Double Bruvac and let's Sakashima the Imposter Bruvac. So now you're double milling and double milling and double milling. Let's cast Fraying Sanity too. That's pretty good. I also really like Stitchadralf, Dreamborn Muse, and Sphinx Mindbreaker. Stitchadralf is particularly good. Whenever you activate it, each player mills 3, and then you get to create this big creature. You know, big creatures are still good for something. And so Stitchadralf can get that consistent mill going on and start pumping out some creatures to block with, or I don't know, I guess you could turn things sideways. Dreamborn Muse has everyone milling X, where X is the number of cards in their hand. And in Commander, a lot of people keep, you know, having 4, 5, or 6 cards in their hand. And so Dreamborn Muse being recursive value of mill 4, mill 5, mill 7. There's that Consecrated Sphinx player out there, so it's like mill 22. Then finally, Sphinx Mindbreaker is a little bit of a clunky Sphinx, 7 CMC for a 6/6 flyer, but when it enters the battlefield, each opponent mills 10. I just think that's a fun effect, mill 10. But it's not just mill 10 for one player, it's mill 10 for each opponent, and it's attached to a relevant body. A 6/6 flyer can hold things down and it can turn sideways really well. Next, we have 2 incredibly power 2 CMC artifacts. I wonder if Tribute Mage will be good in this deck. Isn't Painter Servant 2 mana? Okay, well, let's keep going. Mind Crank is 2 mana. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that much. Oh, it turns all damage into milling as well. This means that all of your opponent's damage is going to contribute to your game plan. And it means that your creatures can sometimes attack in and make relevant milling happen. Then we have Mesmeric Orb. This can get out of control. Whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills 1. Seems innocuous, but it's not. It's crazy. People tap so much mana regularly in this game. You're like tapping 10, you're attacking in, you got elves on the board, whatever, and then you're untapping and you're realizing this is like 15 permanents. Do you have a Bruvac? You have a Bruvac on the battlefield? I'm milling 30? That's totally doable. Mesmeric Orb is very good. I mentioned Altar of the Brood, but there's another artifact I like, Folio of Fancies. 1 in a blue. Players have no maximum hand size. You know what? Everyone can just draw as many cards as they want. Don't worry about that Dreamborn Muse, and don't worry about Folio of Fancies' activated abilities, because you can force everyone to draw cards, or you can pay 2 in a blue and mill everyone for the number of cards in their hand. This could be a big, big effect, because what you can do is just sink all your mana into it, and everyone's like, okay, I'll draw 4. And then you're like, okay, now mill for 10, you know? You can even land Bruvac, activate this, and then it's really hitting big numbers of mill. And then finally, one thing that we shouldn't ignore is that even though it's technically not mill, certain wheel effects can just have people discarding 7 cards. Memory Jar and Windfall. Both of these can be very powerful. They're not doubled up with Bruvac, but just being able to get 7 cards deeper into everyone's library is pretty good. And these cards are just good. You know, you have a lot of do-nothing enchantments, and so you might need to dig deeper to protect them or to get relevant things. Protect yourself, you know, from dying. People don't like being milled. I don't know why that is, but they just don't. One more thing you have to keep in the back of your mind is that you could be fueling your opponent's strategies. Oftentimes it's great to have things in the graveyard, because the graveyard in Commander is like a whole other library. It's pretty great. So you have to be very careful of that. I like to run Soul Guide Lantern because it's like really selective, you know, exile each opponent's graveyard. Hey, get that card right there. Also, Relic of Progenitus is really good. Just it's on the battlefield, and then if you need to, just bloop, all graveyards are gone. Now, the reason I'm a little bit nervous about Relic is that we do have some ways to interact with our graveyard that are particularly strong. Snapcaster Mage. This is really good because we can have access to a bunch of different cards that we have in here. I mean, usually it's going to be interaction. Psychic Spiral is huge mill. Let's read this card. 4 and a blue for an instant. Shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. Target player's mills that many cards. So the game goes on, you could have a good chunk of cards in your graveyard. Shuffle them all back in, and someone is just getting nuked for that amount. It's just so crazy. And then Visions of Beyond is particularly fun. It's a 1 mana instant, draw a card, but if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, this is Ancestral Recall. You get to draw 3 cards instead. Don't you want to be playing Ancestral Recall? I really, really do. This is like a big motivation for me playing this deck right now. Oh my gosh, so good. I want to snap Ancestral Recall too. All right, so besides snapping back Ancestral Recall and, you know, drawing 6 cards and just living my best life, how does this deck play? This deck plays very slowly and very methodically. That does mean that it will need to have some answers, and it'll need to have some card draw to propel it through the mid game into the late game. Search for Azcanta gives you card selection, puts things into the graveyard for some of those graveyard synergies, but when it flips, you can really go searching for exactly what you need. Rhystic Study hits the battlefield, and then suddenly you're slowing everyone else down if they're paying the tax. And if you're drawing a few cards, that's exactly what you want, especially if you have a lot of these enchantments that trigger off of drawing cards. You can also deploy some cards like Tribute Mage. It blocks really well and it gets relevant combo pieces. So then you need to make sure that you stay alive. So cards like Evacuation, just, okay, everyone pick up their creatures. Let's start over again. You know, that's a really key part to this deck. Propaganda, make sure the people are not attacking you. Or Mesmericore, maybe people don't want to attack at all because the milling is such a big threat. Because I believe that you will be a threat. Now, once you're sure you're not going to die, you can deploy some of your milling enchantments and start generating mill value every single time you draw a card. And hopefully you'll be drawing a lot of cards. Psychic Corrosion, Sphinx's Tutelage, Teferi's Tutelage, heck, you can use any number of them, and then you find ways to protect them, protect your board state, stay alive, because with every card you draw, you are closer and closer to milling your opponents out. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're as excited about building a mill deck as I am. I really hope that there's some cool tech that you're using in your decks. Tell me in the comments down below. I also want to thank Cool Stuff Inc. They're the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And if you want to get all of the fanciest of mill cards, go ahead and head on over to them. And if you use the coupon code JUMBO5, you'll get 5% off your order. I also want to thank my patrons. They're amazing. They help me out every single day, and they're the reason why this channel keeps going. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching. I'm super excited to be covering more Jumpstart and M20. There's so much good stuff going on. Oh my gosh. All right, everyone. I'll see you really soon. Bye-bye.